want to welcome everybody and give all a warm welcome. I know that our conversations are leading to lots of material for possible policy changes and moving forward to helping consumers and families, communities, and providers. And I want to say thanks again to staff for making this all possible. So welcome to today.
Thank you, Bill. This is Hina Shaw. I'm a senior analyst at the Kansas Health Institute, and I'm your facilitator for this morning. You are here again for the Quality of Care and Protective Services Working Group, which was convened by the Senior Care Task Force. This is meeting number 6, and today you will be discussing the topic of adult care home surveys and fines. We will be looking at the agenda. We will have some supplemental experts that will be here to provide a little bit of background and information, and of course, welcome questions as the working group wishes. We'll revisit that SWOT analysis that was completed late last year and look at kind of your ideas there, and of course, make changes as you hear from supplemental experts as you wish at that point as well. And of course, the goal is always to lead the working group into developing recommendations, and you will be doing that at your next meeting, which will be held on March 22nd. If there is time today, we may even start on them today. We'll just see where the conversation takes us. So with that, I'm going to kind of kick us off with some introductions. One more thing though before that is your meeting commitments. Let's remember those. So come ready to discuss and compromise. Keep your remarks succinct and on topic. It may be a little tough for this one because I can see where A&E and home care surveys and fines kind of overlap. So, you can think holistically a little bit if you need to, but try to stay on topic as much as possible too. Don't hesitate to, of course, ask clarifying questions, and I will make sure we start and end on time. So to really kick us off this morning, I'm going to go back to Bill to introduce himself again, and also what is one word, just one, and you can repeat it, that comes to mind when you hear adult care home surveys and fines.
Hi, I'm Bill Persinger. I'm the Chief Executive Officer at Vallejo Behavioral Health Care, one of the community mental health centers in Shawnee County serving adults. And, one word regarding surveys would be quality, just quality. Probably not a very creative word, but it really gets at what we're doing.
Say equality, Bill, or quality?
Quality. Quality. Thank you.
Thank you. Deb Merrill?
I would say difficult.
Do you mind introducing yourself first as well?
I'm sorry. I'm Deborah Merrill. I'm the representative from Kansas Advocates for Better Care. And my background is in ombudsman work and long-term care.
Thank you. And your word is difficult, is that correct?
Yes, difficult for both sides.
Thank you. Lee?
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. I'm Lee Chaffee. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Brewster, and my one word would be burdensome.
Thank you. Deborah?
Morning. Let me start my video. I would say Deborah Zare from Leading Age, Kansas, and my word would be broken.
Broken?
Yes.
Thank you. Ernest?
Ernest Katzley, ARB Kansas. Apologize for being a few minutes late. I'm going to say quality. I wasn't sure what the question was, but
what is one word that comes to mind when you hear adult care home surveys and fines?
necessary.
Necessary? Okay.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Let's see. Chrissy?
Krista Khatib, Deputy Director for Adult Protective Services, Department for Children and Family Services. This is not an area I spend a lot of time in, so I would say mysterious.
Thank you. see, is Rachel on?
Good
There you
morning. Good morning. Rachel Perner from Wichita, private practice elder care attorney. My word is prevention.
Thank you. Jan?
Jan Kimbrell, Silverhead Legislature. My word is watchdog.
And then Carter?
Hi, everybody. Carter Olson here, administrator in Cloud County, Kansas. Based on the viewpoint that I'm looking at it from the news, that $20,000 minimum fine up to $1 million fines that we heard in the government this last week, I would say it's destructive or draining or outdated. I have some pretty strong feelings if the group couldn't tell.
Thank you. Tracy?
Hello, I'm Dr. Tracy Davies, nurse practitioner in Dodge City, Kansas, and I'm affiliated with Washburn University as the program director for Psychiatric Mental Health Nurse Practitioner Certificate Program, and I'm also affiliated with Compass Behavioral Health as a clinician. I'm a former surveyor and administrator of nursing homes, and my one word is adversarial regarding the survey process.
Thank you. And I just want to make sure I'm not missing anyone. Camille, are you on? Okay. Representative Isa? All right. Roger Barnhart? Okay. We'll look out for them. All right. Then I also want to introduce our 3 supplemental experts today. So Lacey Hunter has returned to us from KDADS along with Stephanie Bull. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Good morning. Thank you for having me back. My name is Lacey Hunter, and I am the Commissioner of Survey Certification and Credentialing for KDADS.
Thank you. And you're welcome to share a word if you want to, but I won't make you. Steve Anderson is here with us from the Office of the Attorney General.
Good morning. I'm Steve Anderson. I think I was invited to this because of my work previously with the Medicaid Fraud and Abuse Division. And I was there from 2016 until April of last year. I am now the Medicaid Inspector General for the state of Kansas, and have spent a lot of time dealing with surveys and conducting investigations in long-term care facilities, and intimately familiar with surveys as well as the surveyors who write those reports. And I'm delighted to be here, and hopefully we can add something to this group.
Thank you. And your third supplemental expert will be joining a little later at 9:30, and that is Lane Williams from the Disability Rights Center of Kansas. So with that, with your words, everyone had a different word, but they're definitely quality, burdensome, prevention, broken, difficult, mysterious. So I'm sure it will be a good conversation today, very robust. And I'm going to let Camille in now, right as we're starting. And as she's getting situated, have her introduce herself. Sorry, Camille. And Camille, if you have a chance, introduce yourself and provide just one word that comes to mind when you hear adult care home surveys and fines. Give her a second. All right, then I'm going to actually turn to Lacey Hunter. And Lacey, before we get started, I did want to ask if you will also be providing some of the data requests that were sent to KDADS, or if I should follow up separately for that. And this is around the number of CNAs that were put on the registry last year, and then aggregate number on intake reports by facility staff versus residents.
I have one of the items from what legal has given us to report back, and the other one I have data on. But the problem with the reporting that we're having for the complaint hotline is separating when it is a facility staff member that reports it versus a member of the community. It's easy to separate out when a facility has reported as a facility reported incident. However, it's hard to delineate when, say, the CNA on the floor calls when she leaves work and she's the reporter. Those are the ones that are very difficult, and we're finding difficulty in being able to take out of that number for you. But I do have some information on the aggregate data for the total number of complaints that we're taking and the average per day and those types of information that I can review with the group.
Terrific. Then I will give you the floor.
Okay, yeah. I will start with that if that sounds good with everyone. So as far as complaint intakes go, just to kind of give everyone a little bit of an idea of what that looks like for us. So this year, so 2020, in January, we had 863 complaints come in. That compared to years past. So if you look at January of 2021, that number was 686. There is a little bit of a difference there. But then you get back into 2020 and we're at 827. So those numbers and then I did do a few numbers that were what I like to say outside the pandemic years now, so that you can get an idea of pre-pandemic versus that. So then you go into like January of 2019, clearly well before the pandemic was around, and we get into the highest numbers we have, which is, so for January of 2019, we had 953 complaints. And for that same month in 2018, we had 1,044. Go back another year, it's 1,209.
Hey, Lacey.
Yes.
Carter Olson here. Do you guys have kind of a log, I guess, of how relevant each complaint was? So of those complaints, I guess I would be interested to know how many surveyors felt like the ones who came to my facility that said this was a complete waste of our time today to be here. You know, I mean, how many complaints how many times are they caught chasing their tails on a lead that they go, this was just complete bogus?
I can't share that information, unfortunately.
But do you guys keep track of it then?
No. So the only way to track that would be to, it's hard to track that because so when we go out on a investigation through the complaint hotline, so that would be what we would call an abbreviated investigation or a complaint investigation. We're gonna, we'll have one of two actions. We will either find the facility to be out of compliance three actions: out of compliance currently, in compliance currently, or had an incident of past non-compliance. But as far as, whether the complaint we received led to a deficient practice being written, we do not directly link or keep that information. We have had some candid conversations internally on whether or not we felt something should maybe be looked at as re-triaged. If we see a series of from like multiple facilities coming through,
you'd keep track,
and maybe looking at the process of re-triaging. But no, we do all of our complaint intake and investigation, even for the state side, via the federal Psalm Chapter 5. So all of the federal regulations for the complaint hotline and triaging a complaint for the level in which it rises to, which would be you have different levels in which your complaints are triaged at. So when you call into the complaint hotline, you're going to get you're going to reach a nurse. Your nurse is going to ask you questions, ask you kind of the information that is necessary for our system. They're going to ask you if you want to remain anonymous or not. And then they're going to take all that information and they're going to use that as well as the requirements through Chapter 5 of the State Operations Manual to triage that intake. And that intake is going to be triaged as a either a multi-priority, which you can have, if the person has alleged more than one thing, you can prioritize the different allegations to different levels. So you can have what's called a multi-priority. You can have an immediate jeopardy. You have a non-immediate jeopardy high, non-immediate jeopardy medium, non-immediate jeopardy low, non-immediate jeopardy administrative action necessary, off-site investigation, no action necessary, and a referral that is needed immediately, or a referral just as needed otherwise. Depending on when a complaint comes into our hotline, depending on how it is triaged, that then dictates our survey process and how many days or how long it will take for us to go out. The federal government outlines, based off of that triage level, the number of days or hours we have to then be on site to investigate that alleged non-compliance. So for example, if it's an IJ, if we have someone who calls into the complaint hotline and the allegation that we receive is triaged at the IJ level, we have 48 hours to get into the facility and investigate that allegation. For a non-IJ low, that is something where we keep the information on file, and we will look at that allegation when we go back on site for their next full survey or annual survey. Just to give you a bit of the spectrum there. Okay, so I guess I will stop there. Do we have any questions about the complaint intake data or that information? Because then I'm going to switch gears a little bit to the nurse aid registry and give that data, but I want to okay.
I'll ask one more follow-up. The only reason I was asking questions, Lacey, is I was just wondering if you're tracking the people who are making the complaints.
I have a question, Lacey.
Hold on 1 second. I think we're going to let Carter ask his question first, and then you are welcome to ask. I don't know who was speaking, though. Give us 1 second. Go ahead, Carter.
So essentially, are you guys tracking the individuals who make complaints to either identify a pattern of non-compliance at the facility, or to better understand a lack of understanding by that individual person on true procedures and policies at the compliance level?
We do not track and do aggregate data on individuals who call into our
Would
hotline.
that be feasible or unfeasible?
It's not that it's not feasible, it's protected by law. That information, the information that comes into our complaint hotline, is very highly protected by law. But we do, so we do not do, so like the aggregate data on individuals. So every individual that calls into our hotline, we get their information, and then they do have the option to remain anonymous though. So if they say, we ask them for their information and they say, we want to remain anonymous, we have no choice. So we don't even have a way to provide a complete set of that data, because someone could call in and identify them for one call and then choose to remain anonymous for another call. So that information would not necessarily even be accurate, because we do give the ability to report anonymously.
Thank you. Lee, did you have a question?
Lacey. I did. Thank you, Hina. This is Lee Chaffee from Brewster. Lacey, thank you for those numbers. Really appreciate that. I'm just trying to understand the scope of those reports. Were you able to break down those numbers of the 863, for instance, in this past January? How many of those were facility reported and how many were not, were like community reported? Or were you able to break down those numbers?
No, I apologize. And that's where I was telling Hina at the beginning. That's the one thing we're having a difficulty doing. I think that we would be able to break out what would be a true a facility reported incident versus I'm sorry, I am struggling with finding words this morning, versus an individual who calls into the line who might be employed. So there is, a facility report incident that's required, that the facility, as a facility, is required to report into our hotline, that we could break out, but we don't really have a way or a factor to break out the rest of them as far as individuals who call into our hotline. and if they're employed by the facility, if they're making that on behalf of the facility, or if that's where it gets a little sticky for us.
Okay. I think for me, just understanding how many were facility reported and then all of the rest. For me personally, I don't know if anybody else on the task force would want it further broken down, but I'd like to understand what those numbers are. And then did I hear you correctly? Are you not able to tell us of those 863, how many were substantiated and how many were unsubstantiated? Are you able to tell us that?
We wouldn't have that number. So like of the 863 that came in, we haven't investigated all of them. So that is the total number that came in. So of those, some of them we will never investigate possibly. If it was triaged as a referral and or a no action necessary, that's included in those numbers. But then there are other ones that were, say, triaged as a non-IJ low, where we will go out and do an investigation, but not until we're going out for their next scheduled annual renewal, which could be several months down the road from now.
Okay, thank you, Lacey. I think just from my perspective, just to understand again the scope of what is the volume of complaints and how many get substantiated, it would be really helpful down the line if that's something KDADS could build, or to provide that information to be able to say, hey, we got 863, 60% of them came from the facilities themselves, and of that 60%, 40% were substantiated. That would be a very helpful thing for us to just understand where the problem might lie, or what is the focus area for that particular problem. So I appreciate your information, Lacey. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lacey, Bill Persinger in Topeka. Hey, thanks again for being here. And I know you got more to tell us. And so if folks have questions, might hold them until you've gone ahead. And have you gone through all your material, Lacey, or do you have more to?
Sir, that was just the one data report. I have another little follow-up on the NAR data reporting, and then I'll actually get into my topic for today.
Okay. Well,
Sorry.
you've generated lots of interest, and I appreciate the lively discussion. We might just jot your questions down, folks, and pose them when Lacey says that that she's through. Carry on, Lacey. Thank you.
Okay. So the information about the Kansas Nurse Aid Registry that I was able to work with our legal department on getting aggregate data for was the years for 2019, 2020, and 21 for now. And so the way the process works is when there is a referral to KDADS Legal for a CNA or a CMA, there is 3 possible actions that can come from that referral. So there can be what is called a case closure letter, an astonishment letter, or a notice of findings. With that being said, the notice of findings would be the action that has the potential to result in an employee being placed on the prohibition list. So with that information, in 2021, we had 52 individuals referred to KDADS Legal. Of those 52, one of those 3 actions, 22 had an action issued, which means one of those 3 actions that I just spoke of happened of those 52. For 2020, we had 77 referrals and we had 26 actions issued from those 77. And in 2019, we had 166 referrals with 75 actions issued. So as you can see, the trends for the years, as you kind of go back to pre-pandemic, it does kind of get larger as you go back in time with the same data, but you have the same trend with the data. Not the same data, but the same trend with the 2 sets of data. That's all I have for that one, but are there questions about that? Or should I just move right into survey process?
Lacey, I'd say go ahead and take some questions on that. I think you've got some distinct but related topics. So if there are questions, go ahead and pose those out loud or put them in the chat. Thank you.
So may I ask, so was there any CNA or CMA placed on the registry in 2021?
And Camille, I'm just going to say that you asked the question. Go ahead, Lacey.
Sorry about that. This is Camille Russell. Yes, sorry.
Camille, I do not have that information. That is something that I don't believe legal is able to provide at this time, but I will follow up with them specifically. But I do think that you had a few conversations with them, maybe. Did they able to provide you any clarity on what they were going to be able and not to be able to provide?
I have not got that answer from them directly yet. I would like that answer. Thank you.
This is Stephanie Voley from KDADS. So to help answer your question a little bit, Camille, anytime a notice of finding is issued, which is the only action that can result in a prohibition on the nurse aid registry, anytime a notice of action is issued, they are afforded the right to appeal. So they then appeal to the Office of Administrative Hearings. The Office of Administrative Hearings was not holding hearings the entire year of 2021 because of COVID. So there were certain areas that they were not moving forward on only because they couldn't. They didn't have the staff, they didn't have the resources. There were certain areas that they had to focus more on, which were certain like Medicaid areas, and then there were certain areas of DCF that they had to focus more on. So they had shifted their administrative law judges to work on certain areas that needed to stay afloat, as opposed to some more, for lack of a better word, minor areas that like taking away the certification of the CNA or a CMA. So the ones that we did issue and we moved forward with appeal on, because some of them did appeal in front of OAH. There was literally one that sat at OAH for an entire year before we had a hearing. There is nothing that KDADS can do at that point. We are at the mercy of the Office of Administrative Hearings. So even though we were presenting them and we were issuing notice of findings in 2021, there weren't that many individuals placed upon the registry due to the length of time it took at OAH, the Office of Administrative Hearings, to make it from start to finish. Once that initial order from the Office of Administrative Hearings is issued, they then have 33 days to appeal it to district court. If they do appeal it to district court, they still don't go on the registry because they appealed it further. We did have 2 of those cases that appealed further to district court, and we're currently sitting in district court. These were issues that or notices of findings that we issued in the beginning of 2021, and we are still here waiting before we can put them on the registry because they have to completely exhaust all of their appeal rights.
This is Camille Russell again. So thank you for that information. I think it's helpful for the Protective Services group to know this is not about assigning fault. This is about looking at whether or not we have protective services in place in Kansas, where the gaps might be and how we can look at those gaps that might exist. So thank you. That's helpful information. And without opening up a can of worms, I want to put on the list for some point is what are we doing with TNAs that we have findings on. So I'm just going to put that out there. I don't need the answer right now, but thank you.
That's okay. Can you be more specific on what a TNA is? I guess maybe I don't know.
Temporary
if handles.
nurses aid. The state has temporary nurses aides now that are allowed to do the job and work in a home after just an 8 to 12 hour course online. As an administrator in a rural area, it's very helpful for us because we hardly have any ever leads to recruit new staff members, and this has given us a way to actually recruit individuals. But like Camille says, in certain other places, they could be recruiting people who are shady.
We would handle them the same way. That is not the distinction. If KDADS has the authority, which we do for CNA, CMAs, a TNA would fall under that CNA portion. So we would handle them the exact same way, regardless, because they are an individual that worked inside of a nursing facility. So for us, we would handle them the exact same way as we would a CNA or a CMA.
So Lacey, this is Camille Russell again, just to make sure I understand, if you have a finding, perhaps cite a facility because there was abuse by a TNA, the finding is against the facility probably for something, but I mean, that would, and we should assume that would get referred for one of these 3 actions to the legal, and they should know about that TNA. They should know of a TNA, and they should know about TNAs in this situation because we've had those.
I think the confusion lies in that Kansas and many other states have coined the term temporary nurse aide, but that is just a term that has been coined and used. It is not how the federal government sees those individuals and their capacity, nor is it really how Kansas would see that individual. They are working in the capacity of a certified nurse aide. They have less training than the full NASEP program, which is the Nurse Aide Training Competency and Evaluation Program. That is the acronym for the federal CNA program. The federal government has put a 1135 waiver, because we are in a declared public health emergency, on the requirements to become a certified nurse aide in that NASEP program. KDADS has responded accordingly and allowed for that same allowance for the CNA program to be in lockstep with the federal government when possible. I did see some stuff in the chat. I apologize, I wasn't able to get it pulled up. So Deborah, all complaints are not either substantiated or unsubstantiated. So they are substantiated, unsubstantiated, either no action necessary or referral. So there, because if we can now unsubstantiate something we did not investigate. So if we put that there was no action necessary or that we did no investigating and just referred it, we would not say that we unsubstantiated or substantiated. So that there is a bit of a nuance there. That is that they're not all complaints are either substantiated or unsubstantiated. There are some actions taken where that would not be the case. Carter and Jan, so when KDADS posts to their public site, we post all adult care home inspections, findings, and reports. So if you are finding differences between us and the federal site, which is called Nursing Home Compare, which is only going to have your certified nursing facilities on it. If the difference is that you can find it on the federal site but not on our state site, let me know and we can work on that. But if it is the reverse, I don't have much control over that. So that is a federal site that they run. They have their own site administration. The only thing that I can do on my end is make sure that the survey shell itself uploaded to what is called ODI. I do not know what ODI means. ODI is an acronym that the federal government has for the databases that they use. But that's really the only control I have over what shows out up on Nursing Home Compare. But in the reverse, when it comes onto our state site, there is a bit of a lag for someone like yourself, Carter, who is maybe an administrator and knows exactly what your 2567 was. And then before say, your resident's family could go on and find that 2067 online. So you're going to be able to see it on your portal for your plan of correction prior to public. The public will not see a 2567, the plan of correction, the enforcement letters, or the I think most people would know it as the 2567B, which is really a second 2567. You will not find that on the Kansas public site until the facility is found back in compliance with that event ID or that survey.
Hey, Lacey, Carter here. So the incident that I am speaking of is there's a nursing home in my county that I can see that they had an annual survey January 10th, but then I can't see anything on the CMS webpage. And they've already had the 2567 response posted on our page, etc. I think the problem for me lies in the fact that, I think this should be something you guys advocate for as KDADs, because it is important to us. When the only public information about my facility right now says that I'm a 2-star because it's running off of a 4-year-old IJ that our facility got before I got here. And as you can see, I've put in $750,000 of facility renovation since I've got here. We're no longer a 2-star facility by any means, but yet the only public information about my facility is you're a 2-star. So I think that's where the advocacy should be on your part to help homes like us who are doing our part. And for 4 years now, I've been a 2-star home, but I know there's not much you can do there, but isn't that important to you guys too, to help represent things better for the customer population base?
Thank you for that comment, Carter, and that will be a terrific recommendation that could be put together when we are developing our recommendations. Let's stick to asking clarifying questions right now because we do have 2 more speakers that are coming after Lacey. And so, Lacey, are there other comments that you wanted to say from the department or others that have questions as well?
I will say I have not gotten into the topic I was brought here today for, which is the survey process or the fines, but I will say that the PowerPoint presentation that you put out for reference is close to what I would say. So if we are running short on time, if you want to just have the committee maybe review the PowerPoint on the survey process and could submit written questions, I can certainly save time there, but I'm happy to continue as well.
5 or 10 minutes sufficient? Would that work for you?
Absolutely, yeah. No.
Okay.
I am a quick talker. So I guess, just kind of give you an overview of the survey process and then kind of how that leads to and what it would look like. So all of our surveys are unannounced surveys, which means that the facility does not know that we are coming before we are there. And that does not matter what type of survey we are on. We always come unannounced in my division. When we get there, you will see that we will, depending on the type of survey we are doing, we may have 1 surveyor, we may have several surveyors. When we get there, we are going to do what's called the entrance conference. And the entrance conference is where, we're obviously announcing that we're there. We're going to ask for the operator or administrator or the staff that's in charge and go over with them, the purpose of the visit, provide them what's called informal dispute resolution policies, as well as the daily interactions and provider policy, which are 2 policies that we have here at KDADS. The IDR policy, the internal informal dispute resolution policy, is something that is also federally required, but we do it at the state level for all adult care homes. We then ask for that administrator, operator, or person in charge to give us a resident roster and personnel forms to be and to get that to us as soon as completely practicable. And then we go on a tour. And when we're on our tour, we're looking around, we're making observations, we're making notes, we're maybe looking for and talking with individual residents if we're doing, say, a complaint investigation, where we do have some care areas or some areas of concern, or we have specific residents who have shared their names and they do have concerns. We also at that point maybe talk with staff on the floor about concerns we have. One of the reasons for this is because we do unannounced surveys, but once we are there, it does not take long for the rumor to spread that KDADS is in the building, so to speak. A lot of facilities have code words for knowing we're here. You will hear things like the sunflowers are here, the sunflowers are popping, states in the building, those types of things. And those are all kind of a heads up, be on your toes, we are here. But because of that, we do try to make sure that we can maybe get some true observations and interviews and make sure that we're getting a true look into what the facility looks like on an unannounced basis. Once we have done the tour, we're going to go into sample selection. So we're going to be taking a sample selection of the residents based off of the resident roster provided by the facility. And we're going to be looking for several different things, but the sample selection is really meant so that we can get an overview of the care that's being provided to a cross-section of the residents within that facility. Once we have gotten our sample selection, we then go into the real, I would say, meat of the survey process. And that's when we're doing the rest of our informational gathering sessions. That's where we're talking with residents, we're talking with staff, we're looking at medical records, we're looking at staff personnel files, we're reaching out to ombudsmen to see if they have anything that they wanted to add with the survey. Once we have kind of completed the information gathering process, which can take 1 to several days, depending on how many things we're looking into, what type of survey it is, those things. We then will have what's called the exit conference. And just, sorry, a little tidbit. If it takes more than 1 day, we will have daily meetings. If the survey process takes more than 1 day, there'll be kind of a wrap-up meeting at the end of every day. But at the end of the process, you will have what's called the exit conference. At that point, we will let the administrator, operator, person in charge know any potential findings of noncompliance that we've identified. We don't discuss the scope and severity. We just kind of identify the noncompliance, potential noncompliant areas. Once that's wrapped up, once we have done the exit conference and we have exited the building, that is what then becomes what is referred to as the exit date. That date is the date you will see at the very top right-hand corner of those 2567 statement of deficiency forms, or the form in which we provide to the facility that indicates the deficient practices in which they have been found, or that there are no deficient practices found at that time. Once we have identified noncompliance, if we identify noncompliance, we will then determine to what degree their noncompliance was. So we have what is called in Kansas a scope and severity grid. And so when a facility in an adult care home is to be found non-compliant with a statute or regulation, we then kind of grade to what degree they were non-compliant. So that grading system goes anywhere from an A to an L. And to give you a little bit of reference, they go in threes. So A, B, and C are all considered a level with no actual harm happening, with potential for minimal harm. And then you get into kind of level 2, which is D, E, and F, which means, again, no actual harm, but there was more than just minimum potential for harm and or immediate jeopardy. Then you have level 3, which is G, H, and I. That is when actual harm has occurred, but it's not at the immediate jeopardy level. And then that 4th level you have there is the immediate jeopardy level, which means that immediate jeopardy to the residents' health and safety was indicated. So then when you get into the kind of groups of 3, you had A, B, C, D, E, F. So when you're looking at that, the way that works is then we kind of go across the grid the other way. So A, D, G, and J are kind of the first letters for each level. And those are what are considered an isolated. So that would mean that an incident happened that only happened to one resident. It was an isolated incident. There was not several people affected by it. And then you get into that second group, which would be B, E, H, and K. That is considered a pattern, which means that more than one resident, there is more than one incident of noncompliance, but is not at the level of the last one. So for C, F, I, and L, that is considered widespread. So if you find that if this noncompliance has happened with 3 or more incidences, you are at a widespread incident, and that is considered a facility-wide issue. Once we have assigned a scope and severity to all the deficient practices, wrote our deficient practices, we will then issue that statement of deficiencies, or 2567, to the facility, along with their enforcement letter, if there should be one. That process is, this is where I have to kind of switch my conversation a little bit. So that is the process for if we are doing survey work for the federal government. If we are doing work for an adult care home that is state licensed only, such as an assisted living or a residential care facility, once the statement of deficiencies is issued, that's where it kind of, the process goes a little bit differently. So in a state licensed only facility, when a statement of deficiencies is issued, a facility is not required to provide a plan of correction for every statement of deficiency issued. At the state level, a facility is only required to provide a plan of correction if, upon issuing the 2567 to the facility, KDADS issues a correction order. A correction order then gives the facility 14 days from the day that the order was issued to correct the deficient practice, before we would be back in for a revisit to ensure that that practice was in fact fixed. You switch back then to kind of that federal side. It's a little the same, except for in the federal government, they require a plan of corrections for any deficient practice found above that first level. So if you have a deficient practice found on level 1, you do not have to provide a plan of correction. But if you have a deficient practice cited at that second level or above, you must provide a plan of correction for each deficient practice cited. Sorry, excuse me. That is kind of a really quick and dirty overview of the survey process. Many of you who are part of this, have been a part of the survey process, know that that is just really, really condensed. That I just talked about what people do for an entire week's worth of work in my conversation right there, just to kind of give a little bit of time frame of how condensed I made that. So, but I am happy to stand for questions, or I can move into the kind of fees and penalties part that comes after a survey has happened.
Thank you, Lacey. We do have 2 questions in chat, which I will send to you afterwards if the working group is comfortable with that, or if we have time remaining after our our other 2 speakers. And we can, if Lacey has time to stay on, or we can send it to her after. So thank you. Go ahead, Lacey.
Okay, so once we have issued a 2567, the federal government has a few additional remedies as opposed to the state government, but if there is to be an enforcement action that happens, there are a couple of things that could happen. Largely, it would be a civil monetary penalty. That is the action that is most often taken at the state license only level. It is also a common action that our federal partners tend to decide to make when a deficient practice is found to be at a substandard quality care F tag or above an F at that actual harm level G or above. The CMPs, they can come into, I guess there's a process for deciding how a CMP is determined at the state level. When we do a CMP determination, it is a bit of a democratic process. We have the ability at the state licensed only level to assign a $500 per day per citation civil monetary penalty, but that is maxed out at $2,500. KDADs could double that penalty if the facility has been cited for that same deficient practice within the past 18 months. If the deficient practice is found at the harm level or above, that per day limit goes to $1,000 per day and then is capped at $10,000. So when you get into CMPs for a skilled nursing facility or a nursing facility that is got a contract with the federal government, you then get into CMPs that are imposed by the federal government. So the difference there is that KDADS is not able to provide a civil monetary penalty on behalf of CMS. CMS is the only agency that can issue the CMP. Specifically, it tends to be the regional office, and for us, that would be Region 7 office in Kansas City. That's the penalties. That's kind of it. I think I have. Again, that was pretty quick. I apologize. I was trying to be efficient, but can certainly answer any questions. Carter, yes, surveyors. The surveyors who are attending the on-site facilities are part of the decision-making process when making the decisions for the scope and severity and the deficient practices which are being cited.
Lacey, do you know, could you explain for the group how it works when someone gets fined and then they appeal it and then they drop it and receive an automatic, 30 or 40% reduction just for dropping the appeal?
Sure, that is something that is available only to nursing facilities. That is something that is available by the federal government. That is not an option for state government. But the federal government does allow a facility to waive their appeal rights. And if the facility chooses to waive their appeal rights, their CMP will be reduced by 30%.
And how many appeals are actually ever successful?
I would have no information on that. That whole process is done through the federal government with CMS. KDADS does not have a part of that process. You'd have to reach out to CMS on that one.
Thank you. And there's a few other questions that I may just send to you if you don't mind, about the NF surveyors do you have and how many AL surveyors in each department, and the vacancies that you are filling. So if you could provide that information before their next meeting on March 22nd, that would be really helpful.
I can provide it now if you want me to.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
So all of our surveyors are registered nurses. And of those, so for the state licensed only side, we have a total of 7 field positions or 7 field surveyors for the state licensed only. Of those positions, we have 3 filled. And then on the federal side, we have 62 positions. Of those 62, we have 31 filled. The 8 new positions that KDADS has in their budget request are specifically for state licensed only surveyors. So those 8 new positions are requested for assistance with the survey and quality and oversight of state licensed only facilities. Right now, that is the category that we have 3 field staff. We have 4 vacancies, but the vacancies that we do have, and just to give you an idea, those field staff are in charge of 457, I think was the last time. That number changes quite often. Home Pluses open up, and that number changes because Home Pluses they open up a lot faster than maybe some of the other builds. So
Thank you. And so, Lacey, if you don't mind, I think we are going to have to move to our next speaker at this point because we're at 9:50. But thank you for fielding these questions, and keep posting questions to the chat. I will make sure that KDADS gets the list of questions and they are sent back to you before you develop recommendations at your next meeting. So thank you, Lacey. If you have time, and we have time at the end of the meeting, I will leave that to you. But I do want to move on now to Steve Anderson. So welcome, Steve.
And Hina, this is Bill Persinger. Folks, before we move on, please, number one, be sure to identify yourself. And I can sure appreciate the speed and the energy of these conversations, but if we're just going to be speaking like we were in a small group without identifying ourselves and that kind of thing, we'll have to move to a system where the co-chair recognizes people, and that'll slow us down. So if you'll just introduce yourselves and that kind of thing, then I won't have to regulate the discussion more than I want to. So, Hina, go ahead.
Thank you, Bill. And then one other thing before we move on to Steve is I saw that Representative Issa joined, so thank you and welcome, who is your vice chair. And so just wanted to recognize that as well. All right, Steve, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Hina. This is Steve Anderson. As far as talking about surveys go, the Attorney General's office is a consumer of surveys. In that we review the surveys that come out. We are notified through KDAD's referrals to our office for any law enforcement matters, and cases are open based upon those referrals. Prior to my joining the office and Lauren Wolf, who's the nurse investigator for the office, joined the staff, we really didn't look at KDAD's referrals very well, or if we did look at them, they were oftentimes months in arrears. With Lauren coming on board, we started getting the referrals the same time as local law enforcement got them, and we were able to take relatively quick action. And to put it in context, in 2015, we received 1 referral and didn't open a case on it. In 2016, we received 8 referrals, 0 cases. But in 2017, we received 30 referrals and opened 20 criminal investigations based upon that, and have stayed pretty much on that trend since then. We look at the surveys anytime we're looking at a nursing home for any kind of action. We go back and look at all the surveys that have been published over the past several years as potential leads and guides. I just want to speak to fines very quick. Fines do seem to be effective. I will say that for smaller nursing homes, particularly the ones that are not for-profit, sometimes the fines seem much more difficult, whereas for larger corporate-owned nursing homes, fines are usually just considered part of the cost of doing business. And I don't know how effective they are, or if but it's one size fits all, I think, on the fines. and there's no consideration for the facility's ability to pay or not pay the fine.
Carter Olson here, administrator from Glasgow. You are dead on. Small town nursing homes do feel like fines are unfair.
Yes. And that's where I draw a lot of that from. I've spent an awful lot of time in nursing homes, both large and small ones, conducting criminal investigations. And we always meet with the administrator and talk to folks, and it can be very difficult for the smaller places to pay the fine. One comment on the surveys that I think would be useful as somebody who's read an awful lot of surveys is they're somewhat confusing. There's a lot of legal jargon or a lot of explanation. Audit reports, investigative reports can be confusing as well for the public to consume. And we try to put an executive summary at the beginning of the report that basically sums it all up in 2 or 3 paragraphs. That would be a recommendation I would make, that executive summary should be part of the survey process for individuals who are not part of this system that go onto the KDAD's website and are fortunate enough to find the link to all the nursing homes. When they pull up those reports, sometimes you're not real sure what it means or what they're exactly trying to say. So if there could be a summary of the information at the very beginning, it would really help the novice consumer of those reports. I also want to say that as an investigator with the Attorney General's office, I've had the pleasure of working with several of the surveyors on site. That is such a wonderful process. They bring their experience and knowledge to the game. And I've had several of the surveyors comment to me is that they really enjoyed working a matter jointly with us, because as trained investigators, we're much more able to dig deep into the issue and extract information they would only dream of getting. But conversely, them sitting there with access to like point-click care can immediately answer questions we might have about files and what have you. So it's a real complementary process. It doesn't happen in very many cases, but on significant ones, it's very useful. The first one we ever did it on was in Cloud County in Clyde, involving a very notorious case. So that was very useful. And then somebody asked earlier about referrals involving KDADs and what have you. The Attorney General's office probably makes at least 6 referrals per year to KDADs and to survey concerning potential issues for surveys that the AG's office learns about from other sources. Lane Williams is talking, but I can't hear him. And I also want to comment on one of the things that Lacey said earlier about unannounced visits. I agree, the unannounced surveys are really important, but I will say that we oftentimes are told by staff when we're doing interviews that they know, the staff or the nursing homes know well in advance that the surveyors are coming. I don't know how they're tipped off. Obviously, if the nursing home reports something that's going to be an IJ level thing, they know that the surveyors are going to be there in just a matter of hours sometimes. But it is not unusual for for nursing home staff to inform us that they know that the surveyors are coming or knew that they were coming. And consequently,
like a text service you can sign up.
Pardon?
Sign up for text alerts when they're coming now? Is that what you're saying? I'd love that.
Well, they seem to know in advance. Maybe there's a spy within the KDAD's network. I don't think so, but they just know. And consequently, some nursing homes actually put on additional staff to hide the fact that they're understaffed. So they put on a good show for the survey team when they're there. And that's unfortunate because you don't get to see the true picture of what's going on. Correction action plans are very interesting for the Attorney General's office as well, because you get an opportunity to see what the survey team came up with, but also then on the corrective action plan. And unfortunately, we've seen issues where the surveys are not, or the corrective action plans are not always surveyed in person, but rather followed up with. And I would recommend that anytime there's a corrective action plan for any issue that's very serious, that surveyors actually go on site to confirm that the corrective action plan was completed. That's really all I have on the numbers. If there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to try to field them.
Folks, this is Bill Persinger. I'm going to step out of the office for just a minute. So if you have questions or comments, please, Hina will go ahead and chair. Be right back.
Thank you, Bill. Any questions for Steve? I see one in chat. I think it's a comment. In all my 10 years, I know a general 3 to 6 month timeline, but never the day they are coming. Carter and Lee both have said, again, complete mystery.
This is Camille Russell, the State Long-Term Care Ombudsman, and like Mr. Anderson, sometimes our ombudsmen do hear from certain residents and staff in certain homes, and there has been some concern brought up at a national level, and we see it rarely in Kansas, but we do see it that we have corporations who, it seems like there is a trend of individuals who had worked in the corporations, those larger entities, going to work and becoming surveyors and going back out and working back in those larger corporations. And there's some concern that that could be a case where there might be more potential for them to know people and to say things. So.
Thank you for your comment. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you, Steve, for being with us.
Thank you.
Next, I will ask Lane Williams, who is from the Disability Rights Center, to introduce himself and also give kind of a brief background as well on the topic. Elaine, are you on? Can you hear me, Elaine?
Yeah, are you there?
There you are. Yes, we are here.
Okay, I can't hear anything. I don't even hear you on our phone now. Okay, I can't hear I can't hear you. Did you hang up on our phone?
I did. And you are live and ready for this meeting to give your update, but if you're not hearing things, that might be difficult for you. What
Would you like me to go ahead? Okay. Sorry, I can't hear anybody, so I'll just let you know what our office does. My name is Lane Williams. I am the legal director at the Disability Rights Center. We're in Topeka. We provide legal advocacy services to individuals with disabilities. We are part of a system called the Protection and Advocacy System. We're a private nonprofit organization that had its beginning in federal legislation, and we're primarily federally funded to provide advocacy services to people with disabilities and disability rights issues. We have federal statutory authority to investigate allegations of abuse and neglect in facilities for people with mental health issues, and also facilities for people with developmental and intellectual disabilities, also individuals in nursing homes with physical disabilities. We have the authority to go to facilities at reasonable hours unannounced to monitor facilities. We primarily monitor the 4 state hospitals, the 2 mental health hospitals in Osawatomie and Larned, and the IDD facilities in Parsons and Topeka. But we also have a special emphasis in monitoring the 10 nursing facilities for mental health in Kansas. They're a fairly unique creature in America. And I think there's only one other state that has facilities that are similar to these. These are board and care homes. They don't provide treatment to individuals with mental health issues. They're similar to a nursing home, but you have to be qualified through the Pass R2 process in order to be admitted. When we monitor, we meet with administrative staff on particular issues that we may have become aware of. We also just ask about, we go to common areas and meet with any resident who wants to meet with us. In particular, we will be offered to meet with them privately in their room. If they want us to go in there, we can't go in there on our own. But we have the authority to meet with individuals who want to meet with us privately. If an issue comes up regarding mistreatment, either medication, daily activities, any type of abuse, financial exploitation, we have the authority to obtain records. If that individual has the capacity to engage us and doesn't have a guardian, then we can get the records with their permission. If the individual has a guardian who will not cooperate, we have the authority to seek those records, either through court or by convincing the nursing facility that we have the authority to obtain those. So while it sounds like our access authority is really broad, we have to have probable cause in order to investigate any allegation. But so we do take our commitment seriously and not to be too overbearing with it. But when we receive an allegation that an individual has been abused or neglected in the facility, and that could even include a group home for people on the IDD waiver, then we will go and investigate, and then proceed from there depending on the findings. That's about all I have, I think. If I would answer questions, but I can't hear anybody, so I'm sorry. Unless somebody wants to put it in the chat.
I will chat them to Lane if you would like to ask your question aloud or put it in chat and I can send it to him as well. There is a comment from Camille Russell, and DRC is very helpful to fill a gap as long-term ombudsmen are not authorized to serve the NFMH residents. Any questions for Lane? Is there anything else that you wanted to hear as you invited Lane as your supplemental expert, or also from the Medicaid Inspector General?
Thank you. If you need nothing else from me, I'll just log off then.
Thank you, Lane.
Nice seeing everybody. Bye.
Thank you, Lane.
All right. Well, you guys caught up. It's 10:09. So what other questions do we have for KDADs? And Stephanie is still on the phone, and we can ask Lacey to come back. But what are other questions you have for the group? And then I'll turn us to the SWOT analysis if you want to make any updates based on the conversation today.
Hina, Bill Persinger here. I might also reveal to the group that, I had asked you about the possibility of having Lacey return for more conversation. I truly appreciated the passion and the information that, on both sides. And I think that, there are conversations we could have again with Lacey and Stephanie and others that may lead to policy and procedure recommendations, statutory, regulatory, definite, actions and recommendations. So, Hina, if I'm not speaking out of turn, I think you are considering maybe bringing asking Lacey and Stephanie or others to come back on, later this month. Such good conversation. I really appreciate everybody's questions and input. And again, I'm impressed with the level of expertise we have here on, not only presenters, but us as a working group. So just log that, and maybe we can move, hold your questions, write them down, get them in ahead of time, whatever you need to do. But please know, group, that we're going to try to bring Lacey back. And maybe, Hina, does that create more time for the SWAT work that you wanted to get done this morning?
We could take the time to do that, but I will ask if there are questions that you have for KDADs now, maybe Stephanie can answer them. And if not, we can at least jot them down now so that they have time to prepare for them if they are able to return on March 22nd. So you're welcome to post them in the chat, or I'm happy to write them down now. Any additional questions for our KDAD's representative? And I will note that I did write down 2 questions. One was on, please speak to when the CMPs are stopped based on when the facility provides plan of correction and when surveyors are available to come back for resurvey. Another one was, is there consideration of having other professional licensed persons, not just RNs, hired and doing the site surveys? So those were 2 questions that we will be sending to them. Any other questions?
Hina, Bill Persinger here. So I guess I was, sitting there thinking during, the comments, from Lacey and Stacy, that, they do have a number of vacancies, it appears. And I just wonder, with a smaller staff and fewer resources internally there in that division, does the work look more rote and routine and less individualized just because of the volume they're trying to handle? And once they fill these positions or have maybe improved resources, will the operators and families and others feel like, they're getting more individualized responses, surveys, interactions, that kind of thing? And I think that was one of my concerns. One of my questions for Lacey would have been, or may be, once you feel like you're, fully staffed and fully resourced, will there be opportunities for greater collaboration, greater communication, better fixes to the system, improved quality all around that benefits everybody? So it's just a thought I have. And, I think we think about the size of government, maybe not necessarily being a good thing, but I think there are times when it could be a good thing if operators and families felt like this response was very much tailored to this individual, this facility, this situation, versus, okay, here's a standard response and a standard finding. And I don't mean to say it's happening. I'm only saying that, maybe greater capacity there for communication will result in, more specific, and site-specific kind of findings that would benefit everybody. So just a thought.
Thank you. And some follow-ups to your comments, Bill, and chat, just so I announce them. There's a question on, is there difficulty in recruiting people to be surveyors? Why are only half the positions filled? And then another one is, KDAD's running into issues with staff from agencies causing difficulties for facilities in repeat fashion. And then also, it would be helpful to understand how plans of correction are evaluated by KDADs.
Hina, Bill here. It looks like plenty of agenda items for having a return visit by the division.
I will let them know.
Thank you.
Ernie Cutsley from ARP.
Yes.
May I ask a question, please? So,
Of
just
course.
for my own general knowledge, so changes in ownership or bankruptcies of homes or companies that run homes, the effect or the impact that has on, the impact that has on fines or findings of previous surveys and findings.
So if there is a change in ownership, but there was a previous survey done, what happens to those results? Am I capturing that correctly?
Yes, yes, and also the fines that may have went along with those. Are those dropped when the new owners take over, or if the state takes over a nursing home?
Okay,
Yeah, thank you. Sorry.
thank you. And then there's another question in chat. While technical assistance cannot be provided during the survey, is there a plan for KDADS to implement more regulatory technical assistance through program staff? All right, well, I think it will be helpful for KDADS to have these questions in advance. And of course, they can also answer questions when they are on the call. And I will carve out about 45 minutes for KDADS to be on the call, as that's what they've been averaging so far. And then take the remainder of the time for you to fully develop your recommendations. You guys have gotten pretty quick with the SWOT format. And so I think that'll be sufficient time for you to put the recommendations together as well, unless I hear otherwise from the group. And I will keep collecting questions as they come in, but I don't see any more. So I am going to share kind of on the bottom of your agenda was your SWOT that you completed back in December. I want you to take a look at these, and based on the conversations that you had today, do you want me to add anything? Because remember, these are your starting points for the Jamboard and when you're putting the recommendations together. So take a look at strengths. Are there any other strengths that you want to add to this list around your topic of home care surveys and adult care home surveys and fines? Are there any other strengths you want to add based on the conversation today?
Not to get ahead of ourselves, Hina, Carter Olson here, did want to add in the weakness category that it sure seems like the state does not have anybody pushing CMS for what we are viewing on, you know, the issues that we're running into. I asked the question earlier about the CMS reporting web page, and essentially our state's helpless, and it didn't really sound like anybody's necessarily pushing them. So I think that is key for us if we're going to actually change anything, is who's going to step up and be the bad guys to CMS and tell them that, well, providers actually do need some more support.
So advocate for CMS support and reporting. Okay.
Perfect.
All right. Any other strengths or weaknesses?
Tina, Bill Persinger here. Want to clarify something I said earlier in case there's any misunderstanding, and then to see if that translates into any part of the SWOT here. You know, I was not saying that because we have openings at KDADS in licensing, surveillance, that their responses are stock, routine, and canned. But, you know, I do want to point out that as they have more resources, you know, is there an opportunity for increased nuancing and tailoring, you know, especially to smaller facilities who may not have quite the resources to respond to an improvement that's requested. You know, I just, you know, it may be under strengths or it may be under opportunities that with an increased asset at the state level for, you know, surveys and working with providers and families, you know, is there a greater opportunity for a nuanced, you know, finding and outcome and a resolution that meets everybody's needs. So, you know, I'm not sure that even fits into our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, or threats, but I think that the more the state can field and respond to these things, I think the better for everybody. So maybe that fits in somewhere, Hina, maybe it doesn't.
This is Camille Russell, State Long-Term Care Ombudsman. And Bill, I think you're on that. I think it actually goes even to that first, the opportunities about feedback line and technical assistance that were preventative with helping the facilities be able to do their job well, and that they do know, because I think sometimes that is really what we run into as ombudsmen, is they just weren't aware. There's so much, it's such a complex job. And a lot extra going on this pandemic during this time. And so sometimes I think just that technical assistance that KDAD could provide would be very helpful. I hope that's where we're on the same page. Okay.
And KBC kind of agrees with that. So that staffing fully staffed would make a big difference in the ability to do more things. And it would also facilitate the reporting in a more timely manner, which then gets that circle of communication completed faster.
Bill, did you have another comment?
No, I was just going to say that the last two comments were much more well said than mine. I was just pretty clumsy in what I wanted to say, but I appreciate the clarifications. And
we'll clean up
Carter,
the language before you say
great job. Don't talk yourself down. You do great, Bill.
Thank you, Carter.
Even I get word of mouth where it just flows sometimes.
Yeah, guilty as well. But the passion here on the screen from all sides is evident, and I think we're all working toward the same thing, and that's improved. Like I said, my one word is quality.
So as we are making updates to this, I've heard strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities. Any others in either of those areas? I'll start with strengths again. Any other strengths to add? And I can make this bigger. Let me know.
This is Chrissy. I did add a strength, and I apologize if it's,
I
didn't
see
see it. Okay.
Yeah.
Just that the reports are posted on the KDAD's website and available for the community to review. And then this would probably fit more under an opportunity when Stephen Anderson mentioned having that executive summary, something that might be user-friendly for individuals to review and comprehend. And I'm assuming it would help them make choices. I know when I think about adult protective services, when we're visiting with family members about, looking at facilities, we have referred them to the website to review those.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Lee Chaffee from Brewster Place, and I would like to echo under the opportunities what Bill has said and others have said. Just speaking from our experience here at Brewster, we are one of the only homes that chose to participate in the Joint Commission accreditation process for nursing homes. And we have participated in that process. And what I find much more helpful with that survey process is the surveyors are more collaborative. So if they find something that you're doing that could be improved, they will tell you right away, and they will give you resources right away to point you to another home that may be doing it well or to best practice information. And personally, my staff and the residents, that experience made Brewster far better in improvements than the CMS survey process. So I do think that's an opportunity to discuss how that collaboration can happen, because we're all on the same team. We all want great care for those who live in nursing homes.
Thank you, Lee. Any other comments on the SWOT? Any other changes you want to make? Threats? Are there additional threats that you heard today that you would want to add to the list? All right, well, keep in mind that we are going to be referencing this table again to develop your recommendations. One thing that I wanted to bring up that I mentioned that we did meet with Chair Hildebrand and KLRD staff yesterday. And so one date that I wanted to float as a possibility, again, it has not been approved yet, but wanted to see what your calendars look like. What does May 26th look like to you? And this is the Thursday before Memorial Day. I'm seeing some thumbs up.
Bill Persinger here. Morning looks good.
Okay.
To the early afternoon if I was free by 2 o'clock, I'd probably be okay, but you don't have to build that around me either. We've got a great co-chair, co-facilitator.
Yeah, that sounds great. There will be during that meeting, there will be an update from the working groups. So it would be about 2 hours that the two working groups and the subgroup would kind of provide an update on the work that has been done. I would go through the process and kind of high level what recommendations are kind of bubbling up to the top by then. Know that once you are done with your recommendations at the end of this month, as we go through the process, and I will point us back to our handy table right here, we are going to refine and characterize recommendations. You will probably see a survey from us at the end of March to complete kind of that week, since you have kind of a gap there that we built in to complete a survey. And that'll help to see kind of where you as a group stand with your list of recommendations and help us start refining the list and really prioritizing the list, because everything can't be a priority. So we do need to think of a process on prioritizing it. All right, so I'm seeing thumbs up, at least for that date, so I will let them know that feedback. And know that, again, your next date to meet is March 22nd. I will reach out to KDADS to see if Lacey and Stephanie can return for your meeting then. I will send them questions in advance. And if you have any additional questions, you are always welcome to send them to only me between meetings. Please do not send them amongst yourselves, because that could start serial communications, which wouldn't be good. And so that's all I have so far. So let's think about closeout now. And I'm going to go around the room now and especially give time for those who weren't able to introduce themselves earlier. So what's one thing you want to highlight, especially with this SWOT even, or one thing you want to highlight from what you heard today after the discussion around adult home care surveys and fines? And so I'm going to have Bill kick off, and then Representative Issa, and then I'll go down the list.
Thank you, Hina. Bill Persinger, Topeka here. You know, and I have trouble kind of seeing the screen with my reading glasses and everything that goes along with being well over 50. So, you know, and I've read our SWOT several times. I do not have it memorized. Would you just keep in mind, you and the team here, the concept of scalability as we look at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So I'm a little biased towards providers, having been one, you know, all my career. So hearing from Carter and, you know, Tracy as a former administrator and Leanne and others, and very, you know, tuned into that, this idea of scalability. So I'm sitting here and I've got a 500-bed facility or a 50-bed facility. What can I use going forward if there are improvements in policy, procedure, funding, assets, resources? So keeping in mind the concept of scalability, everywhere from Cloud County to Johnson County. And then, you know, I just want to keep focusing on this issue of capacity and the ability of a provider and the state and others to nuance and put things in place if there's increased capacity in our system. Thank you.
Representative Issa? She is on her phone, so maybe it's difficult and we can come back to her. Lee?
Thank you. I think the two thoughts that I would have from here, the first is it is very clear from the SWOT analysis that we all want the same thing. We all want great care for our seniors in Kansas, and that it doesn't have to be adversarial. The process to help that happen does not have to be adversarial. And then the other glaring thing to me in all of our SWOT analysis times here has been that the state and or the federal, at the federal level, we really haven't put a lot of resources, particularly towards nursing homes. And you're seeing this. There's not a lot of resources to survey them or be helpful in resources for helping them provide more care, and there's not a lot of resources to actually provide the care. And so I think that's one thing that's really glaringly obvious, that I'm very encouraged that we're talking about this and potentially upping that resource level to get that care better.
Thank you. Rachel?
Through this process, we're doing some things really well, and my gosh, we need improvement in others. So I'm grateful to the group and the expertise for helping us hopefully understand some of these issues.
Thank you. Camille?
Well, I can't get out of a meeting without saying something about person-centered practices and person-centered care. But I do think as we're looking at the preventative, be able to prevent and identify abuse, neglect, and exploitation and be protective, is that we have to have the people that understand what that means. And so from the surveyors to the folks that need the technical assistance that we're talking about, like to see that we implement more education and training to get our shift to what is supposed to be happening in the nursing homes that would provide for that dignity and respect and not have abuse, neglect, or exploitation or regulatory non-compliance, because people just all understand what that's supposed to look like. And the people that regulate them are looking at it from that perspective too. So it's not punitive necessarily. It is about getting everybody on the same page. And I think so that technical assistance can be done. I think training for everyone to be done. And so we'd be looking at homes from a person-centered perspective as well. And are they actually, so the bad actors, we probably would have to scale up. We would probably be using those regulatory folks in a different way than the folks that just really are trying to do it in a way that maybe even regulators aren't used to seeing it done. And so what do those plans look like, and some things like that. I'm sorry, but that's where I think we ought to go.
Thank you. Ernest?
Yes, Ernest Gutzley, ARP Kansas. I would just say that the troubling things on all this for us is the staffing levels, and then the survey vacancies that are out there. So I can imagine if you are working half the state, or I think I saw that in the chat, that would be quickly tiring, and maybe want to look for new jobs. But I think in all this, as we look at recommendations, we ensure that each resident can attain or maintain his or her highest physical, mental, and social well-being. And so I appreciate the great conversation on everybody's part. Thank you.
Thank you. Jan?
Hi, Jan Kimbrell, Silverhead Legislator. The one thing that comes to my mind is that the attitude towards the whole idea of survey, to me, and if I'm naive, so it is, but it's an opportunity to improve communication, to improve care, not only to the administrative folks in the nursing home, but for the families, for the residents, for everybody concerned. It makes me sad that, here comes the survey. It's doesn't have to be a bad thing, and even when something needs to be corrected, it just concerns me that everybody's the doom and gloom squad about, here they come, it can be helpful. And I think we could go a long way, and what the surveyors come up with, those can be helpful to improving, and that's it. That's all I have.
Thank you. And I know I am over time in keeping you, but I did want to allow space for comments. And so those of you that can stay on, let me know. Deb Merrill, if you wanted to share, if you're
I'll be real brief. Yeah, I'll be real brief. This is Deb Merrill, representing KABC, Kansas Advocates for Better Care. And I think, as most have said, our main goal is to make sure that residents and their families understand more fully. And I like the executive summary kind of thing at the beginning of a survey. Families don't always understand what all the paperwork is and what the forms are, and so they may misinterpret. And the ability for residents and their families to communicate with KDADs and then understand what has happened as a result of that communication would be helpful. I think communication is key and fully staffed everywhere, really, nursing homes and for KDADs. So it can only help residents if everybody works together.
Thank you. Chrissy?
I think the message, kind of a theme I heard is kind of almost like a paradigm shift. And how do we move these from a corrective action plan more to a performance improvement? How do we provide supports and education to strengthen service delivery in all of the facilities to support the highest quality of care possible? And then also, I'm always curious about what is the latest research out there. That's always a theme in the back of my head. I'm sure other states have tackled this, and what are they doing? And are there any lessons we can learn from them?
Thank you. And Tracy Davies needed to leave, but she said, I support the comments made by others. We need to improve the culture of this industry to make it less adversarial, and resources needed to be provided to grow the workforce. Carter?
Hi, everybody. Carter, administrator in Cloud County. I think that the issues I see, there's quite a few. I mean, one, I've talked about the lack of transparency, as some of you guys have, trying to get better information to our families and consumers. Well, we can't do that as a state unless CMS is changing things for us. I also think that there is a reason to highlight kind of that third bullet point at the bottom of the second column there about using civil monetary penalties for resident benefits rather than supporting failing entities. I do think that that is very important. I would have loved for my first fine to have been, hey, you need to use $20,000 to buy a new whirlpool for your facility, because that would have made a difference in our resident care and actually helped us make a change. I think the thing that I would like people to understand, though, is that myself as a provider, I'm out here in rural Kansas. I don't have any corporate over me. I don't have any other resources besides myself and the state and the internet. Not to sing a sad song on it, but if I call and ask a surveyor a question, or if I ask a surveyor what they would do, they always respond, we are not allowed to make recommendations. And that cannot be more frustrating, to feel like you are on a lifeboat. And, you know, I understand everybody here wants us to seem like surveyors are for the good. Well, if you're on that lifeboat in the middle of rural Kansas and a fine of $50,000 is life or death, it's going to shut you down. You do take a little bit more of a defensive attitude with surveyors. And I think the positive for us would be seeing surveyors who actually said, here's our recommendations on how to handle certain situations.
Thank you. And I think I got everyone. So thank you for your comments. We will meet again on March 22nd to develop recommendations. So come with your ideas. I apologize for holding you over this meeting. I did not uphold the meeting commitments today, so I apologize for that, but thank you for your comments. All right, I will see you in 2 weeks.